Okay, let's start with the bottom rack here. I said these two were happy ending power supply and rack cases. This one I'm using here is called the Pittsburgh Modular Move, and not to be a jerk, but I hate this case. It's a piece of crap. A lot of other people will tell you that. They had issues with the power supply, so the solution I was told was just unscrew the power supply from the system and remove it, and just, leave it to the side of your case. It's super easy. No, it's not. And if I could replace it, I would, but I'm not going to go into that right now. Let's just say between that and what I strongly dislike, the sliding nut system that they used, I found it very unuser-friendly. But I've got everything in it now the way I like. With one possible exception, I'm going to stick one more passive module in it and it'll be done. And I don't want to have to mess around with it anymore. So I won't. Here in my bottom left corner, we started with sound sources in the top left. Then we had effects in the middle left. And finally here in the lower left, we have control. This one here is Mutable Instruments Grids. I waited for years and wanted this module. A lot of other people would pick something like Pamela's Workout. This one is a bigger module than Pamela's Workout, but I personally like it better. It can do Euclidean sequencing, which is very random. And it can also, its main job is, you see these three lights here. This is for a kick, this is for a snare, this is for a hi-hat. And it sends those triggers out to those three instruments, and it can also send accents out with them if you want. And you can vary the likelihood of how often it plays the hi-hat by twisting the three green knobs above, or using these chaos knobs, and you can, of course, sync it to another system. So, I recently got the Korg SQ1, which I used to produce two different melody lines in a previous video, and the drum lines that are in time with that are coming from grids. Beside grids, we got one of my favorite and earliest modules, although it's not up at the start of the system. This is probably the first, I'm pretty sure this is the first Eurorack module I ever owned. I love it. It's called the Zorlon Cannon. Basically, it does three things. And it does it twice. If you set it into green high-speed mode and you listen to the output, you'll get a very video game type sound. And you can adjust the pitch here. It's not exactly playable, but you can get very varied sounds that sound like an old Game Boy or something. If you run it in the slowest mode, which is red, you can use it as a 4-step random gate generator. You can see those red lights blinking, but you can clock the 4 gates. So what I might do is have this thing playing, triggering kick, snare, and hi-hat, and then send the clock from this out into here. And then I have 4 random gates that will play in time, but randomly with the drum pattern made by grids. And again, in that 2 oscillator test that I did, that's exactly what I'm doing. For example, the high tom in Little Drummer Boy is being played randomly, but in time, by the top part of the Zorlon Cannon. And, you can also take, if you're in this slow mode, the output is too low to be a sound source, but it can be used as like a 4-step semi-random LFO, and you could use it to play a 4-note sequence. And then the second part of the module is everything else again. So you can clock them together to have 8 random gates, or you can have the top one being in sound source mode and the bottom one being in gate mode. And so yeah, since it's a random gate generator, a CV generator, and an audio source for noise, or for video game noises, it's been very useful to me. Finally, another one, I was so sad about the nebulae being broken that I was like, I'll never buy Qubit again. But I broke down, and even before I had it fixed, I bought the Qubit Chance. Everything I wanted in a random LFO is here. It can be the clock source, or I can take the clock from grids, and I can output 4 very weird LFOs here. I can also output other very interesting things. I love the digital noise. White noise is what you'd expect, but digital noise is extremely odd and chunky, and it generates random rhythms as well, which works well with these random gates. And it generates bursts, which are like super fast trap hi-hat programs. Right now, the one thing that's plugged into it is the clock output, which is clocking the grids module. For me, that's a pretty normal configuration. So, again, drum pattern outs, random drum outs, CV outs, 4 very weird but clockable CV outs. They also have, these are amount knobs, so I don't need to use the trim with them. So a ton of my randomness control, or semi-randomness control, is coming from here. Here we've got a little passive module. I had something else in here. The power supply on the case, which I dislike, was too unpredictable, so I just put in another passive module. This one is 3 low-pass gates, so 3 voices in 4 HP of unpowered space. It's amazing. I put that in because I had another drum here, but it stopped working, the MA808. But I still have the CP909 from Tip Top, and it still works, so it's still doing a cool job here. Best part of this one is if you turn the... what is it called? It's called trash. If you turn trash all the way to the left, you get a very lo-fi clap instead of a normal clap. Here's a boring but utilitarian module, the ADSR from Pittsburgh. This is ADSR just like on your normal synth. So I said that my main voice before was this and this into this guy doing an AD gate. Well, I have a VCA here, so I could make a third voice by running this ADSR. And I also have a VCA in this, so I could make a third voice that way. Those are pretty normal configurations for me. And finally, let's recap the drums. We have a lot of drums in a small space, but no control. We have a kick drum with lots of control. We have a clap here, which I guess I use instead of a snare many times. And here we have a beloved tube of mine, the Metasonics RK1 noise drum. It's not super variable, but the best trick I have is to send a CV into DK CV in, which gives me some variation on it. It often functions as my hi-hat, if Grids is triggering a hi-hat, and it's a bit quirky, but once you know what you're doing with it, it can get you where you need to be. Another passive module, this is a bunch of things in one. A couple of mixing capabilities up here, and a slew generator, which is the same as an AD generator. So just like this was my third voice with a VCA, this could be a fourth voice with the VCA. And when you add these 3 low-pass gates, you actually have 7 voices, not counting the drum voices. That's so many that I almost don't have enough oscillators to drive them all. But if I use something like the digital noise output here, I'm sure I could get to 7 voices. And finally, the big bad dude, we had the 3 other sections of 4: sound source, effect source, control source. Well, this corner is a tube corner. We got the tube drum, and this is, I guess I want to call it a tube ring modulator. It's got enter and exit. It's got an input to FM, whatever's being put in here, kind of like this ring modulator. And it also has an amplitude modulation input. So these 2 knobs let you control how the tubes interact with the source material. But you can also FM it and then AM and FM it to really mess it up. The sound sources are very squealy and crackly, which is what I expect tubes to do. It works great as an overdrive machine. I can run a bunch of drums into it to make very metal-sounding outputs. And finally, a boring but useful module, IntelliGel's output. I think it's out of production now, but it still works, and I still use it. That was actually the third video. I'm going to make one more on the last 0.5 part of my system, so stay tuned for that.